From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. It's the grand finale, our final U.S. Farm Report Beck's College Roadshow of 2024 this week. And we're from the University of Minnesota. Here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Corn, soybeans, and wheat prices have seen a free fall since last fall. So which has the best chance to now rally? A plant breeder with quite the quandary.
I was hired as a corn breeder, but I was basically told, Rex, don't breed any corn.
That sent him on a mission to find better ways to breed corn. It's not just about growing the perfect potato, but also a spud that boasts big yields.
I've learned that potatoes are a crop that will surprise you when you think you have it worked out.
How this researcher is growing spectacular spuds through years of digging up new research. Scouting fields, but not with a human eye.
We would like to see it running in a cornfield, for example, or even in our forest, just because it's our terrain.
How this robotic dog could revolutionize how farmers detect and treat diseases in their fields.
The 2024 U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow from the University of Minnesota is brought to you exclusively by Beck's. From farmers' first pass in the field to the final one at harvest, it's a game plan rooted in faith and belief. Beck's Hybrids is with you every turn because both on and off the field, we're all farmers at heart. See why at beckshybrids.com.
Now for the news, harvest has now moved well beyond the halfway point. USDA providing a new crop progress report showing corn and soybean harvest took a gigantic leap in the past week. It shows 65% of the nation's corn is now shelled. That's 13 points ahead of the 5-year average and up 18 points from just last week, with Iowa a whopping 20 points ahead of its usual pace at 68% harvested. Meanwhile, 81% of the nation's soybeans have been harvested. It's usually 67% complete at this time, up 14 points from last week. Well, the same dry weather that has aided in harvest is not necessarily good news for the winter wheat crop. In some areas, it's actually having difficulty getting established and emerging this year or even planted due to the dry conditions. Nationally, 73% of the crop is in the ground. That's 3 points behind the 5-year average.
Some producers are opting not to plant in dust this year, hopefully awaiting a better scenario with some rain.
The states seeing the most significant delays are Oklahoma, as well as Montana. Well, we finally know more about the government's plan regarding tax credits for sustainable aviation fuel. The Treasury Department clarifying its guidance for qualifying for the Sustainable Aviation Fuel 40B tax credit. Treasury has specified the October 2024 updated GREET model must be used to calculate emissions reduction percentages, which specifically relate to catalyst inputs for alcohol to jet SAF pathways. It's a minor change and comes with only weeks left before program expiration. So industry officials say the importance of this change is what, if anything, it means for the 45Z program.
When Treasury announced the guidance, the original guidance for the 40B tax credit, they indicated that there would be a 45Z GREET model. We're still waiting to see whether that applies solely to GREET, to sustainable aviation fuel, or if it is a 45Z GREET model that applies to both transportation and aviation fuel. That's the big issue right now.
Winters says on October 1st, Treasury officials indicated the guidance won't be issued before the end of the Biden administration in January. This leaves biofuels producers in limbo regarding how to calculate the tax credit and negotiate feedstock agreements. So they've asked for a safe harbor to help the biofuels industry in the interim. And it will be up to the Supreme Court to determine appropriate venue for court cases regarding small refinery exemptions. The High Court announcing it will hear a case from the EPA on the requests of small refineries to be exempt from the renewable fuel standard. The Renewable Fuels Association and Growth Energy commenting on the court's decision to take a look at the issue. Saying that the Fifth Circuit Court was an improper venue to hear challenges on SREs. It says the court opinion set up a clear split with several other circuit courts on the question of venue, adding this is precisely the sort of issue the Supreme Court is meant to resolve. All right, that's it for the news. It was 80 degrees here earlier this week, and it may have cooled off, but it is dry even here in an area that was saturated this spring. Are there any chances of rain coming up? We'll have your forecast next.
U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. Their Hydra Push manure spreaders qualify for financing starting at 2.99% through September. Contact your local H&S dealer today.
Well, if you're just now joining us, we're in Minneapolis this week, wrapping up our 2024 College Roadshow from the University of Minnesota. And we stopped at some farms on the way up here. The overwhelming story from farmers is how dry it is, even this far north.
Current drought monitor that was just updated, we can see again a lot of dryness starting to move, especially into the more central plain states of the country. Out west, though, we can see a little bit of dryness and again some moderate drought developing off of the East Coast. Unfortunately, again, West Virginia and parts of Ohio still seeing those severe to actually exceptional levels of drought, something we've been seeing pretty much throughout much of the summer and unfortunately much of the fall as well. Moving again to the central part of the country, dryness for everybody. A lot of people seeing that level 1 stage of moderate drought, unfortunately starting to turn into extreme drought as well, especially when we head out west there. Again, it's going to be the border of the Dakotas and also with Montana and parts of Wyoming too. Again, extreme, and unfortunately we're really starting to see exceptional growth up there and down in West Texas as well, something we're keeping, of course, a very close eye on. And it does look like a lot of the country will be getting some rainfall this upcoming 6 to 10 days because of a system that's going to be off in the Pacific Ocean. So let's go ahead and time out that initial arrival of the system. We can see another large ridge moving across the country, bringing well below above average temperatures again to the eastern coast. And here you go. Here's that big trough making its way off of the Pacific Ocean, really going to bring cooler temperatures, 1, and 2, again, a chance of rain and a widespread chance of rain right as we go right before Halloween. So people actually could be trick-or-treating there in the rain. Make sure you check in with the local forecast, of course, with that. And honestly, there we go. Another low pressure system moving through, and we are looking like it's going to be an above average chance of rain to end out October and actually start November. Great news there. Here's our next 7 days, and we can see a few systems moving through. A nice shot of moisture all the way again from Oklahoma up through Michigan. That's going to be moving through actually later on today with a cold front coming through. And again, it's going to be a lot of the west coast going to be seeing the northwest coast. Actually going to be seeing some above average chances of precipitation. And again, some of the northern plains up into Canada too, seeing that too. And here you go. Here's that precipitation outlook again to go ahead and end the month. Again, great news for these folks out there. We're dealing with low levels again in the Mississippi and other key waterways in this country just because of all the ridging and that high pressure that really clears out the skies as well. Again, much of the middle of the country going to be seeing much needed rainfall, but while out east, it'll be fairly dry.
Thanks, Jack. Well, when we were here last year, the harvest price for corn was 90 cents better than what it is today. Soybeans were $3 higher than where we sit today. So which crop has the best chance to recover in the year ahead? Our marketing discussion is from right here at the University of Minnesota next. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. We're here from the University of Minnesota. We've had a great show so far, a lot of discussion that we're having this weekend, and I'm excited to have a great group of economists with us. We have Professor Ed Ussett, as well as Associate Dean Jolene Heydrich and Dean Brian Bohr joining us today. Ed, I want to start with you. We saw some life in the markets this week, but from last year when we were here to now, we have kind of seen a free fall in these commodity markets. I mean, you look at corn down 90 cents to $1 since last fall for the harvest price. Soybeans down $3, wheat down $1. As you look at the pressure that commodity prices have faced, what do you think has the best chance of a rally next year?
I like the prospects for wheat and corn. I don't want to get anyone wildly bullish, but I look at the wheat situation, and the stock situation worldwide is far from burdensome. We've got this ongoing war in Ukraine. I heard a very interesting term about that from another analyst a couple weeks ago. He noted that the market has become comfortably numb about the war in Ukraine. And
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The U.S. situation, we have flat demand, and we had a couple of good crops here in Minnesota. We're going to have a record spring wheat yield. So domestically, it doesn't look too good, but worldwide, I see prospects for higher wheat prices. Corn market is doing well. I mean, domestic demand. Ethanol is good. Here I've got my colleagues here. One, Brian is a livestock person. Jolene is a dairy person. And those two markets are doing very well because just yesterday, I think hogs life of contract highs and their input costs, corn and soybean meal, are down. So they're doing well. So demand for corn domestically, even export demand doing well. Ethanol demand is keeping pace. And so I feel good about corn. Soybeans, I don't want to get into that.
Not so much.
We got issues there.
Jolene, let's talk about dairy, because price is much better than where we were a year ago. Yet talk about volatility in the milk markets. How have dairy producers kind of weathered that volatile storm?
Yeah, I feel like dairy producers, like, their norm is volatile milk prices. They're used to it swinging one way or another. Like Ed mentioned, September was one of our highest milk prices in the past year and a half, which is always welcomed relief for our dairy producers, especially when we head into this time of the year where we see demand increasing with the holidays, kids back in school. All of those things really help that market. Where most of our dairy farms are trying to figure out how to weather that storm is looking at their cost of production. So they are getting some relief with the commodity prices that Ed mentioned. But that cost of production is around $19 to $20 per hundredweight. And if that milk price is between 22 to 23, that's still a pretty tight margin for them to recover on.
Dean, let's get into the demand piece a little bit. When you look at some of these possible new areas of demand, specifically sustainable aviation fuel, I didn't realize that University of Minnesota actually played a role in SAF.
Yeah, we have, and there's demand growing there, of course, and traditionally ethanol, of course, is a big piece driver of demand. But as we're looking forward, and one of the things the University of Minnesota has done is we've looked at new crops, because when you think about carbon and carbon credits and some of the things coming on there, there's Scope 1, which is the actual production of ethanol or sustainable aviation fuel, and then there's Scope 2, which is how are you sourcing that to the corn crops and so on. So this contribution to how are we finding new and novel ways to do that, to both lower what the airlines, so Delta just flew their first sustainable aviation fuel flight out of Minneapolis-St. Paul, and looking at how do you bring that into a commercialized framework, right, to get the fuel into the system, to reduce their goal. They're trying to meet their goals for their credits, and be able to do that in a way that we can use across all crops. I think that market growing is these promises to be kept by the airline industry to make those moves. So that's where we'll see, I think, some real growing demand and innovation around how we achieve that.
All right, well, our discussion here from the University of Minnesota is just getting started. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. We talked a lot about tariffs in our news block, and maybe is that, the fear of tariffs fueling some of this demand that we've seen as of late. And there's a lot of concern about tariffs and what the impact that it could have on agriculture. And, NCGA and ASA recently did a study, an impact study on tariffs. And they found that if we did impose 60% level tariffs, specifically on Chinese goods, corn prices would fall anywhere from 8 cents to 12 cents a bushel. Soybean prices, 60 cents to $1 a bushel.
Yeah. Current corn prices, cash price of corn is, by our estimate, $1 under production costs today, even after a rally from the August lows. Soybeans are $2 lower. You've mentioned even lower prices in the case of tariffs. I've said this often to producer groups when I travel around and talk about trade and tariffs. Trade is so important to American agriculture, not only to the grains, but to dairy and to the pork and the beef industry. Our country exports everything in the world of agriculture. And if we get into a trade war, agriculture producers are going to learn that they're the infantry in the front line. That's where the casualties will be. It's not good.
No. And, you think about some of the other challenges that farmers face in the U.S. One of those is labor, and specifically the dairy industry. Dairy industry has always been labor tight. But when you look at some of these small and medium-sized farmers, how are they dealing with those labor constraints?
And that's a question that I often get when I'm talking to producers, are what are those innovative ways to address labor, especially when in some areas they had a high school population that would come and milk, and that's sort of not the case anymore. And a lot of our producers are looking at more creative ways to adopt technology to help with that labor. And we have sort of two groups in that farm size around like 200 cows or less that are looking at robotic milking. Some of them are going in with that all-in investment of about $200,000 per unit and looking at how that can milk about 60 cows over the course of the day. Whereas some of our other farms are looking at finding older robotic milkers for about $15,000, retrofitting that. So like we're further along in that technology adoption now, where some of those labor things can be addressed in a slightly cheaper alternative.
Dean, there's a lot of questions about Farm Bill. Are we going to see a Farm Bill? Are we not? What is the outcome going to be? Can we get it passed in the lame duck session? What's going to happen? A lot of uncertainty there. We talk a lot about Farm Bill for some of the commodity programs out there and the impact for producers. But let's look at ag research. How vital is the Farm Bill to ag research?
Yeah, it's really critical of that. And it often does get lost between SNAP conversation, commodity conversations. So I always say that most of the things we do in research doesn't happen. We don't create a new app every day like people think about digital technologies. It takes 20 and 30 years to make those investments. So that federal funding is critical to be able to make those investments. And we're just talking about SAF, for example, those crops. Those have been under development since the 1990s and just now coming into market as new sources of aviation fuel, for example, and other purposes. And one of our colleagues, Phil Pardee here at the university, did an analysis that showed in Minnesota there's a $40 return for every dollar invested in ag research. And your eyes opened up a bit there with that. And the reason is all these returns are annuities, right? Every year when you get that crop, that return to it. And then in Minnesota, we have extraordinary climate conditions for corn and soybeans and crops in general, horticultural crops. So when you put $1 of research here, the yields and returns to that are large. And that goes across the Midwest and U.S. in general. So it really is critical to food security, food sustainability, all those elements. And we often do say those investments in food security are national security.
Well, speaking of that research, we're highlighting a lot of neat research here at the University of Minnesota coming up. Growing the spectacular spuds, some potato research, plus how they're using robots to scout fields and address problems in the field. I'm telling you, there's so much cool stuff happening here at the University of Minnesota. We will talk about that coming up. But first, we need to take a quick break, and we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report.
Hey, welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week, we're in my neck of the woods, and we're going to check out a classic Farmall H from Minnesota.
It's a 1946 Farmall H. I did it for a 4-H project back in 1999. We bought it from a family friend. He used it on his farm. He was just kind of selling it just to actually buy some other things. He got it. The fourth gear was bad in it. He had to refix that. We sandblasted all the sheet metal, repainted it all, and then I took it up for a state fair. We do use it around here on a daily basis, just for pulling on trailers, hay racks. At the local farm show, we do the exhibition farm plowing with it. We did all of the work here at the home place. We just got out of the shop, we worked in it. We fixed it up back in December. We started on it, well actually back in usually like November, we started on it. Worked on it all the way through until March. When we did the painting on it, the humidity wasn't a big factor. Yeah, the paint adhered real well to it then. And then you're indoors for the winter too, so you're not that cold. Dad was always big into the IHs and stuff, and he actually grew up on a farm. And Dad knew that I always liked the little H's. He doesn't quite figure out why, and I don't know why I like them either. So we bought it from him. He actually pulled hay wagons. He actually runs a little hobby farm. So he actually used it to pull around the hay wagons, the baling hay with it. He used it every day. Just for the fact that it was a 4-H project, it's probably one of my favorite ones. So, out of only 6 tractors. So,
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for letting us visit your backyard this week. By the way, we consider the entire state of Minnesota Greg's backyard. When we come back, he's a plant breeder who made a career out of breeding corn, but when he came to Minnesota, he had a tall task. He could do anything except breed corn, but what he did is something that could have a profound impact on researchers across the globe. Our Farm Journal report is next.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition. The 2024 U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow from the University of Minnesota is brought to you exclusively by Beck's. From farmers' first pass in the field to the final one at harvest, it's a game plan rooted in faith and belief. Beck's Hybrids is with you every turn because both on and off the field, we're all farmers at heart. See why at beckshybrids.com.
Well, imagine being trained for a very specific job, but being told you were being hired to do anything but that. Well, that was the case for one researcher here at the University of Minnesota, and that tall task opened the door for an entirely new world of groundbreaking research and opportunities. Rex Bernardo isn't your typical plant breeder. Instead of actually breeding corn, he's finding new and innovative ways for other researchers to do that.
I was hired as a corn breeder, but I was basically told, Rex, don't breed any corn. We don't need you to breed any corn because the private companies do such an excellent job at doing that.
Originally from the Philippines, he never saw power tools as he was growing up. They did everything by hand, even when building houses.
It's only when I came to the U.S. that I found, oh, there are power tools. There are saws that are powered by these motors. And I thought to myself, boy, if these two guys had these power tools, the house they built would have been built probably with a higher quality and easier and quicker. And this same concept of power tools applies to plant breeding.
It's that concept that launched his career, finding better ways to breed crops to better serve farmers' needs.
We use drones, we use DNA fingerprints. We even try to simulate the entire breeding process and ask what-if questions. What if we grew these hybrids in 5 locations, or 8, or 10? What if we do this, and while keeping the costs the same, how much gain do we get in the end?
For Bernardo, it's important to keep that curiosity burning, always searching for ways to better breed corn.
We have a growing population, we have dwindling resources, we have increased demands, and we're expecting more and more of the crops that we have. And to keep up with this demand for meat, for plants meeting human needs, I think we need to come up with better and better ways to breed corn or any other crop for that matter.
Researching ways to use different technologies available, he says there have been many successes as well as failures.
We learn a lot from failures, and oftentimes we learn more, as you well know, from the failures we have than from the fewer successes that we have.
As he works to uncover improved methods of breeding corn, he says he's learned cost and access to technology are two of the most important factors today.
When I started my career, for example, the way corn breeding was done was we simply grew corn out in the field and we see how they yielded, did they stand up, and then we made evaluations based on these field data. And then DNA fingerprints came to the fore. And at that time, DNA fingerprints were so expensive, but now they are a lot cheaper than evaluating a corn hybrid out in the field, and that has been a game changer. Just that cost differential and the quickness at which we can do these types of evaluations just has changed the way we do corn breeding.
From being able to predict if the corn will lodge or not, or even be resistant to disease, he says the DNA is like a roadmap.
Genome-wide prediction is simply the use of cheap and abundant DNA fingerprints to predict how a corn hybrid might yield, or how tall it would be, or what grain moisture it would have at harvest.
It's forecasting those possible bends in the road that allow researchers to bring better products to market even faster for farmers.
What we're simply doing is using DNA fingerprints as a surrogate or a substitute for field testing. That doesn't mean we don't need any field testing because we need that database of field data, but then we use those DNA fingerprints as sort of a tie to be able to do these predictions. My hope for my own research is to make a meaningful difference in discovering new things that others have not found out, to add to the arsenal, so to speak, or the toolkit that breeders have to help them do a better job. I wasn't hired to breed corn here at the University of Minnesota, so I'm researching different methods that I hope practitioners in different species and other universities where public plant breeding is done, or in the seed industry where these practitioners can put into practice these tools that I've developed.
When we come back, a glimpse around the globe is next.
Register now for the Milk Business Conference, December 10th and 11th in Vegas, for a chance to win tickets to the National Finals Rodeo while in town.
Well, the corn and soybean markets got a huge demand boost recently with strong weekly exports and a string of flash sales. But is the recent buying all based on value? Grain market analysts tell us some of it may be tied to fear of increased tariffs or trade wars. Some recent polls have suggested former President Trump is gaining momentum, and he's talked about increasing tariffs, especially on China, plus renegotiating USMCA. The 2018 trade war with China and the implosion in soybean prices is fresh on traders' minds.
A lot of the buyers out there are looking at this and be like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen, with trade if Trump gets elected here. We not only do we have a value, but we might as well be buying also, just in case, because there is a you never know factor in all this.
Well, we've kept you updated on a lot of corn buys from Mexico, but where's China? Chinese soybean imports from the U.S. have surged, but Brazil does remain the top supplier. It's reported that of China's 11.37 million metric tons of soybean imports in September, more than half of that, 8.45 million metric tons, came from Brazil, while 1.71 million metric tons came from the U.S. That's a 13-fold surge from last year. For the January to September period, soybean imports from Brazil rose 13%, while arrivals from the U.S. fell 15%. USDA did say China bought more than 4 million bushels of U.S. soybeans this week as part of a flash sale. Secretary of State Lloyd Austin announced a $400 million military aid package to Ukraine during his visit to Kyiv this week. Meanwhile, despite an escalation in the war between Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine's grain exports have surpassed last year's pace. For the 2024 to 2025 season, exports have reached 13 million metric tons. That's up more than 8 million metric tons from last year at this time. Exports this month alone reached 2.6 million metric tons, significantly higher than at this point last October. In Russia, though, wheat production could fall for a third straight year. Two leading Black Sea consultancies are forecasting production in a range of 80 million metric tons to 85 million metric tons. Experts say unfavorable weather, including heavy rain in some regions and drought in others, has complicated winter grain planting across Russia. One crop consulting company says the poor conditions of winter wheat is raising concerns about an increased risk of winter kill and crop failure. Well, that's it for a glimpse around the globe. When we come back, which presidential candidate would be better for ag when it comes to trade? Chip's Corner is next. Time now for Chip's Corner. AgriTalk host Chip Flory joining us from his studios in Iowa. Chip, we are just a little over a week away from the election. It could be a very pivotal election, not only in terms of the presidential race, but also Congress. And leading into that, I know this week you had a very veteran senator in on the AgriTalk conversation.
Yeah, that's right, Tyne. When we do have a senior senator like Senator Grassley on, we've got to talk on this close to the elections. We've got to talk to him about what the elections in general mean. We've got to talk about what are the rules and the rights of legally registered voters. And you know what? Let's just talk about what it means to have the right to vote.
You got a chance in America to rule or be ruled. You have a chance to govern or be governed, and I hope you want to be a part of the process of governing. And the basis of that is voting. And a lot of people around this, about 80% of the people on the face of this globe, don't have that privilege that we have in the United States under the Constitution.
That's right. So take advantage of the rules and the rights that you have in this country. Get out there and vote on November 5th. That'd be the bottom line there.
Well, and Chip, one of those areas that's drawing quite the controversy in ag is where both of those presidential candidates stand in terms of trade.
Yes, absolutely, Tyne. And there's a lot of concern, a lot of anxiety over the trade issues when it comes to the choices that we have in the presidential election. There's a lot of farmers that don't think that the Biden Harris or the Harris Walls administrations even have a trade policy when you get right down to it. And then when you look at the trade issues of a second potential Trump administration, it's loaded up with all kinds of tariff talk, and there's a lot of concern about that as well. And here's what Senator Grassley had to say about that.
I'm a free trader because I think we got to negotiate tariffs down if we're going to sell our agriculture products overseas. I think tariffs can be used legitimately if they're called countervailing duties.
Yeah, you got to use tariffs are a good use if they are used as a countervailing duty, is what Senator Grassley is saying there. And we know that that former President Trump has said that he is going to come out and use tariffs in a more trade offensive way, use those tariffs as leverage against other countries to get them to trade the way that we would like them to trade. So there are farmers that say they really, if trade was their only issue in this election, that they wouldn't have a vote in this election. They couldn't vote for Trump. They couldn't vote for Harris. Now, so fortunately, farmers are looking out, and it's more than a single issue vote that farmers are going to be casting when they get out there and vote on November 5th.
All right, thanks, Chip. You can catch him twice a day, weekdays, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Central for AgriTalk. When we come back, growing a spectacular spud. It's research we're highlighting from right here at the University of Minnesota next. The secret to growing the perfect potatoes, well, it just may be in the soil. And one researcher is digging up answers that could help farmers score even higher yields. It's all happening right here at the University of Minnesota, and we're giving you a glimpse of it all this weekend. The spectacular spud is a fan favorite across the U.S. More than 1/3 of all potatoes grown in the U.S. are used to make frozen products. 85% of that is made into French fries, and 22% of potatoes grown in the U.S. are actually turned into potato chips.
See, this is a pretty good set here.
A crop that's packed with vitamin C, potassium, and fiber. Potatoes are also a focus here at the University of Minnesota.
I look at ways of improving nutrient use efficiency for that crop in Minnesota. And I look at ways to manage nitrogen in particular more efficiently so that the crop takes it up and it doesn't get lost to the environment.
Carl Rosen is an extension soil scientist whose job is to be obsessed with potatoes.
I've learned that potatoes are a crop that will surprise you. When you think you have it worked out, there's always going to be something that's going to be different the following year.
Unlocking secrets in the soil is something that could help the more than 20,000 potato farmers across the U.S.
Soil health is important because it is a way to provide nutrients, but also a microbial community that's conducive for plant roots to grow. And so we want an environment that plant can grow and can also cover the soil and keep it so that you're not losing nutrients and soil to the environment.
One area he's focused on is soil-borne diseases that can really impact root growth of potatoes.
So the one disease that I look at is what we call potato early dying. It's a verticillium disease caused by a fungus, verticillium. That is prevalent in any soil that potatoes are grown, at least in the upper Midwest, where potatoes have been grown for an extended period of time.
Potatoes are typically grown in sandier soils, soils that aren't able to store much nutrients.
And so what I'm trying to do is find management practices that work well to produce the yield, have a sustainable crop, but then at the same time reduce any environmental impacts from those inputs.
But one important piece of growing potatoes, according to Rosen, is crop rotation. Another piece of the research here is looking at cover crops and how potatoes respond to different cover crops used across the U.S.
So, for example, to control soil-borne diseases, the main way of doing that now is using chemical fumigants. Okay, so what we're trying to do is maybe look at a rotation crop that would be able to produce chemicals on its own when it's incorporated into the soil to provide what we call a biofumigant.
He says when farmers use chemical fumigants, it can often kill what's good in the soil.
You use things like fumigants, you're altering the microbiology of that soil. And you know, you're killing the pathogen, but you're also killing the beneficial microbes as well.
The other downfall of some of the fumigants used is the cost.
If you're using chemical fumigants, it can be as much as $300, $350 an acre or more. The prices are going up. So if you can be more precise in where you put it, you'd be saving input costs, for one. So you wouldn't be unnecessarily applying it where you don't need it.
From looking at different sources of nitrogen to testing different types of irrigation, Rosen says producing potatoes can be a complicated system, but it all boils down to yield. Well, what if you could scout those potato fields, but also treat any diseases when you see them? And better yet, what if all that happened hands-free? It could be an option quicker than you think. That's next.
Purchase with a Purpose is brought to you by the Mighty Micro from Mosaic Micro Essentials. We put more in so you can get more out. Visit microessentials.com to learn more.
Drones are one of the fastest growing tools adopted by farmers across the U.S. Even though they aren't new, the way farmers use drones has changed. It's no longer just a toy, it's a valuable tool. But there are some things even a drone can't see from above. That sparked a new idea for one team here at the University of Minnesota. They decided to revolutionize research with robots. The Agricultural Robotics Lab at the University of Minnesota is filled with every electronic you can imagine and more.
Actually, we're trying to let the robot both run and fly.
Si Yang is using these electronics to try and solve some of the issues farmers face in their fields every year.
For example, there's disease and stress happening on the crop, and they want to first identify the problem, monitor the problem, and eventually manage the problem by applications. We say variable rate application, meaning that for different locations, instead of uniform high rate of fertilizer application or chemical application.
Specifically, she's focused on wheat scab, an infection of wheat heads that occurs mainly during flowering. The team wants to use technology to help autonomously detect issues in the field and then spot treat those diseases.
We started with wheat scab disease because it's one of the most devastating wheat disease that not only U.S. farmers, actually farmers all over the world is facing. And we found that the drone didn't solve the problem very well for us because when the drone fly over the wheat field, the awns are shooting up, which kind of block the view of the side of the spike where the disease shows up.
That's when the team came up with this OmniAg robot, a robotic dog.
Initially, we designed it for high throughput phenotyping in wheat field for wheat disease detection. And then because of its a smaller scale and versatile in walking and getting used to all terrain situation in the field, we would like to see it running in a cornfield, for example, or even in our forest, just because it's all terrain.
It's not just wheat fields. The team is wanting to utilize robotics to solve problems in different crops and different plants, including turf and preventing winter turf damage.
Due to the snow packing during the winter, that will cause damage to the turf grass. And they would like to see how early the stress can show up, even before visible symptom or visible damage in the field, in the turf.
Relying on data to build prediction models, it's that data that could ultimately help solve problems for producers.
We have this reduced number of people involved in farming, and we have larger field per farm. And those all kind of lead to this ultimate solution using autonomous technology, and where robotics and sensing play an important role.
I think Scout would have been a perfect name for that dog. Get it? Because it's scouting fields. Well, that does it for U.S. Farm Report this weekend and our grand finale of our College Roadshow this year. And what a show it was. A big thank you to the entire team here at the University of Minnesota, and a huge thank you to Bex for partnering with us for College Roadshow once again. Ag Day is wrapping up their College Roadshow from South Dakota State next week, so tune in Friday on Ag Day to see that. And of course, tune in to U.S. Farm Report next weekend. We are back in the studio to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.